God is all-knowing and able, but he's also a restorer according to his will. What we see about Job is that he endured. And that is another thing that we also need to, which calls for attitude, to suffer well. He did not curse God. Yes, he cursed the day he was born, but he did not curse God. Many suffering is a reason to walk away from God or doubt God and explore other solutions. We need, even in the midst of suffering, not to lose gaze, sight, attitude, perspective towards God.
Hello and welcome to the Tabaza podcast, where we bring you truth for a dark world. My name is Max Esanga on behalf of Veracity Fount, and once again I'm glad that you were able to join us once again for another wonderful topic where we bring you content that is relevant to your Christian growth. And today with me in the studio I have a wonderful friend and a very godly and good gentleman called Raymond Bukenya.
Yes, sir.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
This is your first time here?
Yeah, I think. Maybe yes.
How does it feel?
Wonderful, exciting, and I'm looking forward to a wonderful conversation.
I am looking forward to this conversation. We are dealing with a topic that a lot of Christians don't really deal with and don't quite understand, and that topic is suffering well. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things that we've been brought up to think, either suffering is not of God, or when you're suffering, you're out of the favor of God, or it's because of something you have done. And so a lot of people tend to think about their suffering that I must have done something wrong. God is not happy with me, or something wrong has gone with me. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely.
But I think the first place to start is, why is there suffering? As in, where do we suffer?
Thank you very much. And perhaps even one of those questions that we need to address is, what exactly do we mean when we say suffering? What is it? Because there is the why, but the probably there's an interplay of the what and the why, what we are experiencing, what we go through, like you said, going out of favor with God. That is what you're experiencing. Then the why is because you're trying to wrestle with what you're experiencing, but you know exactly what you're going through. So if, for example, it's a mosquito bite, you want to ask, but why does God even allow mosquitoes to exist? What exactly do they add to the ecosystem? That said, I think it's important to have a definition for suffering. We sometimes assume that we know it because we all experience it. Hence, we think we know it. Or we breathe oxygen, so we know it. But then you realize that there is a definition for oxygen. There is a chemical formula for oxygen. So in a nutshell, I think I'll quote one of the ladies that I believe suffered significantly in her life. And she talks about suffering being a state of having what you do not want while longing or wanting that which you do not have. It's a state. It's a duality. You have pain, you long for relief or healing. That duality. The pain is there. The healing is not yet there. That is what you desire. It means that the healing is absent. So the absence of joy, the absence of relief, the absence of whatever you desire, but the presence of that which you don't desire can be called suffering. And as we will talk about it later, I think what even worsens suffering is, for us Christians, is the belief that as a Christian, while you're in that state and you pray and you fast and believe God who restores and makes things different, then God is obligated to change your circumstances. What worsens suffering is when you are in that place of expectation. It's one thing to wish it away. It's another thing to expect God to do something about it and you believe he has to. That worsens suffering. So to start with, it's a state. It's a state of having what you don't want, bearing under any weight. It can be discomfort psychologically, emotionally. It can be even pain physically. So it's called suffering. But why do we have it, you asked, didn't you? I think it's important to understand that there are many reasons why. So one reason is not enough. So for example, when someone imagines, because you've fallen out of favor with God, that's possible. But that's not a reason. It's not satisfactory, because there are people who are not quote unquote suffering as you are, but they are not having any relationship with God.
Yeah.
Which is a dilemma throughout the Bible. Whether, I mean, if you wrestle through the Psalms, you'll see how the psalmist, saying, how come the wicked are prospering? How? It's just unbelievable, unthinkable. The prophets, one of my favorite guys is Habakkuk. He's like, no way, we have gone through too much, Lord. You make it worse when you use a wicked nation to judge us and the other wicked nation. Because the expectation is that God should be dealing with the wicked harshly, terribly. And you who quote unquote is the righteous, he should be sparing you. But then all of a sudden you're going through hard times and the wicked are not. So you can't use that, the idea that you're falling out of favor with God. But there are many reasons why we have suffering. One, obviously, there is suffering that is self-inflicted. Decisions, choices have consequences. Consequences can be good, can be bad. When you make bad decisions, when you make wrong decisions, when when you take the wrong path, there will be consequences. Sometimes you might escape them, but not always. Okay? So, one, self-inflicted. We can go to the spectrum of what you call suffering, but there is self-inflicted suffering that is because of the decisions we make, the choices we make. And I don't think I need to explain that. But then there is that which is inflicted on us by others. You asked why. Some people would say because of who we are, where we are, and who God is. But now I'll go at self-inflicted, then that which is inflicted by others. Mark, you have every potential possible to cause me suffering. And I equally have the same. By nature, we inflict suffering on each other. I may not do it right now, but I cannot tell in the next 1 hour what I will do to you. And of course, it's good that we're putting on sky blue. And just a few days ago, Arsenal inflicted a significant amount of pain and suffering onto a team that puts on this kind of color.
For the record, I don't support that team.
I know, but I'm just saying, I think you're putting it with me to kind of stand with me, encourage me. But
you received many.
Suffering or pain is on a huge spectrum that you can never. You might be on this other side of the spectrum and look at the other person's side, and you're thinking, that one is not as bad as I am, or that one is in a very much worse situation. But as we journey through life, we each have, Christians, non-Christians, all by nature of being human in a fallen world, we have the potential and the ability to hurt one another. So that's one of the reasons why we have suffering. It is inevitable in this kind of existence. Thirdly, there is suffering that we actually take on sacrificially. It's called sacrificial suffering. This one is very common with mothers. We know very well that giving birth comes with pain. Revolutionaries, people who stand and say, for my country, I'm willing to go through 27 years of jail. And you're thinking after 2, 3, 4, why not give up? No, they are sacrificing their liberties, their privileges for the others. You could think about many others, and we live in a country where when you ask many questions about the current situation, they will be asked, where were you while we languished in the bush in the 1980s? Okay,
Eating sausages.
I didn't taste sausages in those days. There was no chance to eat them when the war was going on. But the thing is that there are people who will sacrifice for the sake of others. So they will choose suffering. We choose it. If you love somebody, genuinely love tends to come with that. There's a certain sense of suffering that you'll have to go through because you've chosen to love somebody. Now, obviously, the epitome of that type of suffering is a story we are familiar with, the story of the cross of Jesus. That story, someone who is innocent chooses suffering sacrificially for others. Now, lastly, is the suffering that is complicated, the mysterious, the innocent one, the one that you cannot explain from the other three categories. You didn't choose it. You didn't make any bad decisions per se. There's no one whom you can specifically look at and say is malicious towards you. Not even the spirit of your ancestors, even if you wish to look at that. Not even the devil himself per se. And not because you're falling out of favor with God, but things do happen. They happen to you, and you can't explain it. At least not from the this side of eternity. You can't. And so those are the four categories I would give. And I look back to many scholars that agree that we have that innocent one that we can't explain. And that is the most problematic one. Because where you've self-inflicted, then it's a matter of
Just
introspection and then
get out.
work out how to get out. Okay, if you attacked me and I hit you, it means that I was self-defending myself, and so you got a punch because of that. So next time, don't do that. Okay, just don't do that. Or if somebody attacked you, or you were walking out in the night on a very bad street and something happened to you, so you have to think through. Okay, that person was bad, but was I using wisdom in this case? So, among others, but in a world where you're interacting with other people, also inevitably you can't rule out an accident as you're driving on the road. So in context, this left hand of mine got a brachioplexus injury in 2020 because I was knocked down by a speeding car. Now, you're not going to say because there are accidents on the road, so I will not drive, or I will not walk, or I will not ride. But things of that nature will happen in our world. However, you have a place to be more careful. I'll give one more example. I've lost a phone twice by snatching on Kampala roads. And all those times I've been using my phone on a boda and in the car. Now, someone will say, you know very well that people snatch phones. Just be careful. Someone did something wrong to me, right? But I was also a little more reckless or careless with my phone. So if I accept that, then I have to deal with it. Okay, I have to accept I made a mistake. But then that doesn't give a license to somebody to steal my phone. Okay, so there's two factors in play here. Now, those two you can explain. But then there are those that you can't explain. For a mother that takes on labor pains to give birth to a child who brings her joy, that one you can explain. But for suffering like the kind that Job goes through, as we shall see at some point, how do you explain it? The suffering of the innocent, the child that is born with cancer, how do you explain it? All right? So that's the innocent category. I think I'll leave it there for now.
So you also mentioned the potential to inflict pain
On others.
On others.
Yes.
Obviously, in a sense, that has a place from where it comes.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the cross, Christ taking on that pain.
Yeah.
And so you have Christians who believe they shouldn't suffer because Christ has suffered and borne the pain. So we shouldn't suffer. And so that means to many of them that I shouldn't have to worry about the potential for someone else to inflict say, pain on me.
Or someone else shouldn't have the potential to inflict pain on me.
Yeah.
So it's sort of you're immune.
Yeah, in a sense.
You know,
in a bubble of some sort.
Yeah, I obviously theology can never get any wrong. That is very, very wrong. It's unbiblical. It's actually even not pragmatic. Because the truth is Christians know it. They go through suffering. They suffer. And I think the sooner we accept that reality, even as Christians, the sooner we will have, let me use the oxymoronic language of we will suffer well. Like when suffering comes, you will suffer differently from when you try to pretend and deny that because you're a Christian, therefore you can't suffer. I recently had one apostle, when he was in Kigali, addressing a huge gathering, and he said, we are the body of Christ, and that is a biblical truth, isn't it? So everybody was like, yeah. There is no way cancer should be found in your body. You are the body of Christ. And I was like,
I must say you've mimicked him very well.
Are you serious? But I was like, really? And so there were people who clapped, but I could see a hesitation in some of them. Why? Because they're not that gullible. They know that even the ones in the gathering are sick. Then they know that they have sick relatives who actually are believers. Because sometimes you may have a sick relative who is not a believer, but you're a believer. But sometimes you have a sick relative who is a believer. And you know they're a believer, but they're sick. And you can't just go back to them and tell them, because for you've been told that believers, followers of Christ, shouldn't have cancer in them. Then you can't just tell them that, because you're thinking you want to tell them that they don't have faith, or they have fallen out of favor with God. Something is wrong with them, as you earlier began. And I want to tell you that I've been a Christian this is 2025. I've been a Christian for close to 20 years. And by that I mean a Christian. I was born in a Roman Catholic family. I went through Omugigi. I finished baptism, confirmation, finished Omugigi. I was an altar boy. I was not a Christian. I even went
You were an altar boy.
I was an altar boy,
Yeah.
but I was not a Christian.
So
I want to
you
tell you.
used to wear the garb.
That white thing, I used to assist the priest, holding stuff, blah, blah, blah. Now, I was not a Christian. Why I say almost 20 years is because it was 2006, July 16th, when I actually made that rational decision after university. And I want to tell you, I had no clue this discussion on Christian suffering. I wouldn't have this conversation even until probably 6 years ago, when I was already a Christian. I remember there was a time when we were doing apologetics gatherings, meetings, and we would be responding to people's questions. And on my team, there was a specific person we would direct a question on suffering to. I didn't really take questions on suffering to be personal or serious. I looked at them as intellectually, basically. I would say, okay, this person will respond to it. I never thought that I would be sitting down to think about a question on suffering until it moved from the space of intellectual and distant to personal. And what do I mean? And along the journey, I lived in Karamoja 7 whole years as a missionary. And I saw what you would call a suffering community. I saw Christians. I saw growing churches. But I did not identify, relate with their suffering until I went through my own. So the idea of Christians suffering, whoever thinks that Christians should not be suffering needs to be very careful. They're either living in, what would you call it? They're not living in this world. They're living somewhere else, as they say that they're from above. But if you're in this real world, Christians also do suffer. And it's not strange. Peter says in 1 Peter chapter 4, do not be surprised. Do not be taken by surprise when trials come upon you. It's as if something strange is happening to you. No. This is what has happened to everyone. No, this has happened to everybody. And now we could even be thinking about physical suffering because you're a human being, but then there is also suffering, what Peter and the apostles often refer to, because they were Christians. They chose to follow Christ. There is the difference between those two. Now, Ugandans at large, we don't always face that one. That category, we don't fall in it. But we fall in the category which everybody faces.
But if you go to countries like China,
there are many countries
Korea,
where I was
nations.
recently in South Korea, and I went to the DMZ. I was told that in North Korea, you're not allowed, it should never be heard that you're a Christian. It should never be heard that you have scripture. It should prison. The people in prison are not numbered, but that's just not North Korea. There are many others. Here it won't happen. So we are discussing suffering of poverty, disease. We are talking about lack, like I said in the beginning, the definition of having that which you don't have. So you have poverty, but you desire wealth. So you're in the state of desiring wealth, but lacking it. And so we consider that suffering. And it is true. When we lack food, it is not a good thing. It is a bad thing. Okay? Now, can a Christian go through that? Obviously. And I'm not talking about something strange. Do Christians face it? They do. They lack school fees. They lack clothing. They lack many things. Does that take away the fact that they are Christians? No. We have to separate the two. Okay? You're a human, you're Christian, you have needs. Okay? And God knows about them. The difference it makes to suffer well through that, unlike others, is an issue of attitude, unlike experience. So there's no way, there's no idea, I cannot say that you will go out suffering, you will go suffering and enjoying the experience. No. But the attitude in your suffering, towards your suffering, ought to be different as a Christian. When you face need, when you face lack, when you face disease, when you face loss, okay, when you face pain, like currently I have flu, and I have a brachial plexus injury, and because of it I have neuropathic pain in my hand. When I don't have flu, I don't feel pain. When I have any viral infection,
you feel pain.
I feel my nerves shooting. and that is pain. So I will occasionally clutch onto my hand because it's not pain that is situated anywhere, just strikes. Now, we will face pain, okay? So the Lord Jesus, whom you say you follow, therefore you're a Christian, says he suffered, you will suffer. And let me give you this quote from George MacDonald. He says, "For the Son of God suffered even unto death, not that man may not suffer, but that their suffering may be like his," and he concludes and says, "not in vain." Hence, whatever suffering we encounter,
It's not in vain.
it cannot be in vain, especially in view of a sovereign, loving, powerful God. If he lets it happen, and he will, the question is why? And hopefully he gives you an answer.
Yeah. So that brings us to the story of Job.
Yes.
Job's suffering, which is revealed to us in the book of Job.
Yes. Yes.
And so what do we learn from that? What can we learn from that? What can we glean from that story? I think of all the stories, well, apart from Christ, who was the innocent, holy, sinless child of God, who is God, who suffered unfairly, we have maybe Joseph and Job, who really bring out the story of suffering.
Yeah. Actually, there is no one in the Bible that doesn't go through difficult circumstances. And no one is immune. Just that the stories are different, and some stories are more highlighted than others. For example, when you look at the story of Job, there's a guy that we easily forget in the Old Testament. For example, Joseph in Genesis. His story almost disappears in Genesis. Going beyond Genesis, we forget him. And those of us who hardly look at our Genesis in the Bible, Joseph's story is almost unthought about. But
you only encounter it when you go to Genesis.
If someone forces you back to Genesis, but yet it is a story that has a significant amount of suffering and so much innocent suffering, if you would say. But yes, the one you brought out is Job. May I tell you that a few years ago when I was doing my master's thesis, I did it. My dissertation was on the missiological value of an African perspective towards suffering. That what can we pick from the African perspective towards suffering that we can use missiologically, hence an apologetic.
Missiologically meaning
to reach out to others, to reach to those who are suffering without understanding. And I did my research in Karamoja. That was my case study. And Kampala as well. So why am I using that background is because I ask people, when they look at their Bibles, when they are going through suffering, Christians, when they're going through suffering, which books or which personalities in the Bible encourage them, or is there a run to? The book of Job stands out. The Psalms, Joseph's story, Daniel, among others.
The lion's den.
Exactly. So you did mention, apart from Jesus, I did not mention that. Shockingly, disappointingly, disgustingly, no one, including pastors, named the cross of Jesus
as
a point that we look to, as a person that we look to in our suffering. Now you see the story of Job is important, and it is known to be one of the oldest books in the Bible. The cast is very simple. It is Job, his unnamed wife and unnamed children, his three named friends, a young man called Elihu, and then the main character, God. All right?
So somewhere in there, the devil appears.
Of course, the devil is another character. And the cast of angels who are gathered. So it's easy. It's a book that you can read. I think I've read it probably 10 times. God has given me that journey. It's one of the books I first read. But now, when I look at that book, it can easily overshadow us, which is a gift to us because Job is a human. Job is not ordinary like you and I, and I'm using you and I because I think you're as ordinary as I am. I may be wrong, but I'm an ordinary guy. I'm not as wealthy as as Job. I'm not as wealthy. I don't have the same social capital that Job had as a rich man. He was a family man. He had 10 children. I have 7. I'm not yet there.
I have none.
Yes, don't you see? No. You're not as ordinary. He's not, But Job loses everything.
Yeah. Actually, except his wife.
Although, except his wife, and we'll get into that. So Job has what you call security, and the devil identifies it. And he says, the reason why this guy is worshiping you, God, is because you have guarded him. So Job, by the way, Job's businesses, yes, God may have blessed them and it was prosperous, but they count so much, even for you and I. All people work so hard to get a certain amount of shield against lack and need. So we take kids to school that they may be better positioned, that they may earn, get a job, earn well, be protected from whatever suffering. We build houses, put fences. We drive in cars and don't sit on border borders because border borders are more risky. So there's a sense in which we try to shield ourselves. May I also tell you that Christians also pray and fast that they may shield themselves from whatever danger may come their way. Now, why do I use that in the story of Job? Because everything, as Job says, that which I feared has come upon me.
Yeah.
Even him, Job, a very righteous man, as you would say, godly man, as he would be identified, he dreaded. He dreaded to be in the situation that he finally finds himself in. Did he choose it? No. Did he do anything wrong to God? No. We are told, we who have the vantage point of reading the story, that, the devil gets into this kind of bet with God. You take away whatever he has and you see, he will curse you. And God says, okay, you go. You got to take away everything he has. So he goes, everything hits, all his property, nothing. All his kids, nothing. Job still farm. Then his health. But God specifically tells the devil, do not touch his life. Now, Job's story is crucial for us because some of us read there and stop in the first two verses and then go where he's restored. We skip verse 3 to verse 30. No. Verse actually 41. Because verse 37 is where the discourse between Job and his friends end. Then God comes in with 70 questions towards Job. And when I said why, when I asked the question why, because Job suffered and asked why. Chapter 3 is full of lament. Why? Let me just read for us chapter 3. I think it's helpful for someone out there. Chapter 3 of Job. He asks God, Sebo. First of all, when his friends came, they kept silent. They looked at Job's situation and they were like, They didn't say anything for 7 days. All right? The wife who tried to say something told him to curse God and die. And Job rebuked him, okay? But obviously, sometimes we don't understand the wife's situation, where she's coming from. You've lost your livelihood. Your husband is going through difficult stuff. The trauma she's going through, don't spiritualize it. Whatever she says at that point, I'm very careful blaming her because I've had people say terrible things when they've encountered only one thing like this. It was Bugembe who sang, or you lose one thing, you lose a job and then you curse God. You understand? So Job chapter 3, he opened his mouth finally and spoke. He cursed the day of his birth. Let the day perish on which I was born. And the night that said a man is conceived. Let the day be darkness. May God above not seek it, no light shine upon it. He goes on and begins to ask questions. Verse 11. Why did I not die at birth? Come out of the womb and expire. Why? Why did the knees receive me? Normally when a baby was born, it was given to a father who received him on his knee, his lap. And so he said, why the breasts that I should nurse? For then I would have lain down and been quiet. I would have slept. Then I would have been at rest with kings and counselors of the earth who rebuilt ruins for themselves, or with the princes who had gold, who filled their houses with silver. Remember, this man was wealthy, so his points of reference and circles of reference are definitely what he finally ends up being with, yet now facing suffering. He's thinking, why didn't my life stop there? Because I would have been buried, even with those people, without experiencing this. But then he has become rich and famous and has good social capital, and he is now facing this. In verse 15 he says, why was I not as a hidden stillborn child, as infants, or never see the light? All right? Verse 20 says, why is light given to him who is in misery? Do you understand how life gets complicated? Why is it given to him who is in misery? Why is life to the bitter in soul, who long for death, but it does not come? Or dig for it more than for hidden treasures, who rejoice exceedingly and are glad when they finally find the grave. Why is light given to a man whose way is hidden? Job, if you've noticed, Job is asking, why? Who is asking? Who should give him those answers? Now the theologians come in, his friends. They begin giving him their theology. Very unbiblical theology. Job, you've sinned. Yeah. Or Job, your friends, your children have sinned. Job denies, and then they get back to Job. There's no way. Job, look through history. We have seen only the wicked get punished to this level. Ask yourself, what if Job had only lost one thing? What if he had only lost one child? How would it have been interpreted?
The child had done something.
Maybe, you understand? Or he had sacrificed to get wealthy, blah, blah, blah. Or what if it was just one dimension of his business? Maybe the camels, you understand? But everything, So the disaster that befell Job would not be explained within what people had seen. It could only be wickedness. Job, bulijo tulimba. We have seen you prosper. We didn't know that you were this wicked. Now we know. Because there's no one in history that has been punished for being righteous. Only the wicked have suffered this.
They later on start making up their own.
Exactly. So believe me, from verse 4 to verse 37, it is three conversations of Zophar, Bildad, and Eliphaz. Eliphaz being the oldest, Bildad middle, Zophar the younger, and then they are all going against him. They're all going at him, and they're blaming him, and they're coming at him for denying. Even the fact that he was denying that he was a sinner was also a problem, because then it meant that God would be wrong. In there, Job asks and says, okay, if I have sinned, let's bring out the scales. Let's put my sin on this side, and let's bring out the magnitude of the disaster that has befell me. Honestly, am I the worst sinner that such things should befall me? And because I've gone through this book, then there's a guy who comes up called Elihu, who has a different perspective. He doesn't agree with the others. He doesn't agree with Job. He says, Job, look here. I have one problem with you. Is you're demanding justice from God. Because he did. He said, God, come. He did. He said, come, let's face each other. And that is why chapter 38 onwards, God comes and says, okay, Job, okay, you said I have come. Now dress yourself up like a man and let's talk. And he asks him questions about nature, about creation, about sustenance. And Job twice, chapter 40, Job says, you know what, Bansonywe, I'm silent.
And God
continues and says, you called me, I've come. 70 questions asks him about certain things that you don't need to know. Do you know the extent of the bowels of the seas, the waters? Do you know where the foundations of the earth are? Do you know the pillars that hold up the sky? Do you know when the mountain goats are pregnant?
That's the one which we always
you understand? And do they concern Job? No. But are they part of God's creation? Yes. Job, you and creation are my care, my response. I take care of all creation. You're not the only one thing that I take care of. But even you, I take care of you. You don't know so much. You know certain things, but there's a lot that you do not know. Job, reality is bigger than what you know and see. But thank God, it helps him to see that. Now, he asks him many questions Job cannot answer. Job says, you know what? I'm silent. I'm quiet. Please, my lips are zipped. And when God ends his questions, Job's response should be what helps us in terms of thinking of perspective and attitude. His question was why. He never got any answer in terms of his why. But listen to him in verse 42, chapter 42, at the end. He says, I have heard of you, with my ears, but now I have seen you with my very own eyes. Now, obviously, biblically, it was ridiculous even for a Jew to even say that I have seen God with my eyes, because that would mean death.
Yeah.
You don't see God and you live. What is Job saying is that I had a particular perspective towards you. I see you differently. I have a new perspective of who you are. He asks to be forgiven. Now, you might be thinking, now the sufferer, he's asking the guy whom we know permitted his suffering to forgive him. You get?
Yeah.
Yes. And that's where God's sovereignty comes in. You have to see God's sovereignty in the book of Job. You also have to see God's grace in the book of Job. God is the one who preserves Job. God tells Job, go offer a sacrifice, not for himself, but for his friends. We have to see that God does not judge Job for anything he's accused. No. He tells their friends to bring sacrifice, he offers for them, he becomes a priest on their behalf, and God forgives them as well. Then later on, our favorite part is restoration. Job is restored. Now, I want you to know that Job is not restored because of his positive confession. Neither does he make that positive confession of, I've seen you, I've heard of you with my eyes, now I've seen you with my I've heard of you with my ears, now I've seen you with my eyes. He doesn't do that because he has been restored, just like us we do. We can be there struggling, we are wondering whether God really works, then finally something happens. Social media, my God, God has been good to me. Well, exactly. You understand? That's not where Job is coming from mere materialistic restoration. No. God is who he is to Job, even still in his situation. The restoration comes later, at least as per the story that I read. Job's story is very crucial for you and I today as we wrestle with suffering. That you may not know, you may get to know why, but sometimes you may never know why. All right? 2, you may never even get restored. In fact, we don't see many stories of restoration, let alone one in the Bible, but also today in life. We don't always see restoration. From a personal experience, I think there was a time when I made my own suffering much terrible, when I joined others to declare and pronounce restoration upon my hand. Until I got to that point and I was like, but what if it doesn't? Is God still God? God is sovereign, and it's a major part of the book of Job. God is gracious, and it is a major part of the book of Job, all right? And God is all-knowing and able, but he's also a restorer according to his will and purposes if he wants to, all right? What we see about Job is that he endured. And that is another thing that we also need to, which calls for attitude, to suffer well. He did not curse God. Yes, he cursed the day he was born, but he did not curse God. And did not walk away from God. For many, suffering is a reason to walk away from God or doubt God and explore other solutions. But to Job, it's not. He kept looking at God. And I think that's a challenge we get. We need, even in the midst of suffering, not to lose gaze, sight, attitude, perspective towards God. And whether he restores us or not, we know that he's sovereign beyond our suffering. And then you didn't ask about the cross, but I was going to transit and say, and that's where the cross is the epitome of all things. So even as you look at the story of Job's innocent suffering and the devil orchestrating it, look at the cross and see it's an innocent suffering orchestrated by the devil, all right, permitted by God for something even greater. You understand? I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, that is some really powerful stuff. So I guess one of the things I think that compounds people's suffering is one of the things that people just generally tend to do is in the midst of my suffering, I'll look around. I'm going through this difficult thing. I'm a child of God, born again. I pray, I fast, I give tithe, I do all those things. And I look around and I see some dude there is living a promiscuous life. He's
Yeah.
drunkard. What? He's enjoying his life. Look this side. There's a guy who's takes the office guy and takes the bribes. He's doing all this thing. There's nothing wrong happening to this
Yeah.
guy. You look around you and you're like, but I'm the one who's God, really. I'm the one who prays. I'm the one who knows, goes to church.
Yeah.
I do all these things.
Yeah.
And yet, I'm the one who's in the middle of suffering.
Yeah.
So I think that compounds a lot of the suffering. So how can we suffer well when the wicked seem to be prospering? I know you've, in a sense, hinted already in the story of Job. But Job's friends, you can't necessarily call them wicked.
No.
I guess the one you can relate to is Psalm 73, where the guy says, man, I looked around and all I see is evil. And I'm wondering, why am I serving God?
Yeah.
And I think many people get to that. How do you...
Indeed, it compounds it, especially when you look at others. And remember, I said, look at God. And I think, first of all, when you look at all the other things that you claim you do as a Christian, do you do them so that you may not suffer? Because the truth is, like I said earlier on, we do everything to protect, to shield ourselves from suffering. But I would say it's ridiculous, because the truth is suffering will come. It will come. And it should no longer surprise us that we meet suffering in this world. It's a broken world. You may do all things right, okay? That does not take away that the place where you're doing everything right is a messed up place. The world where you're doing all things right is a broken world, okay? In fact, I'm not saying don't do everything right. I'm saying you do everything right, but do not be surprised that even in the midst of doing everything right, you're going to meet suffering at some point or another. Now, let's take it seriously. So, wait a minute. So, because you tithe, you give, you pray, you fast, you worship, you read the Bible. So, for you shouldn't lose loved ones? Like, you should never lose a loved one? Like, all your loved ones should live forever and ever? No, a loved one is going to die with one thing or the other, okay? So, for you should never lack anything? Like, where have you seen that anyway? Even the Son of Man did not have where to lay his head.
Yeah.
So for you, just because you pray and fast and give tithe and give seed and blah, 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 so for you should never face difficulty. No. The world you live in by default, by setup now, as I think it's C.S. Lewis who said in The Problem of Pain, that humanity sinned itself into a new state of existence. That before we sinned, before we fell in the Garden of Eden, there was a different state of existence. And you can agree with him. But the moment we chose to rebel against God, we sinned ourselves into a new state of existence. And while we are still on this side, there is no reason why God would promise a new heavens and a new earth if we're going to be experiencing exactly that which we should be experiencing in the new heavens and the new earth right here, where there is no tears, no sorrow, no pain. That is not this side of existence. That is on the other side of existence. That is what we should look forward to. In the meantime, while we are here, even if we don't cause it, someone is going to cause it. But the thing that we need to be, and many theologians would tell you, be looking at is constantly asking God, what are you teaching me, or what do you want me to learn, or what do you want others to learn from that which you're allowing me to experience now? Listen, we are doing that only for pain and suffering. We make a mistake not to do it similarly for pleasure. Because even the good things we experience, what are they for? Are they just for me to enjoy? Oh wait, is it because you fasted and prayed and did all those spiritual gymnastics, therefore you deservingly got the good things? And then when you get any difficulty, you face them undeservingly? All right? I think it was John Piper who asked, when he was asked the question of why me? Why me, yet I do all these things? And then the question is, why not you? Who do you think should experience it? And then you point to the what? To the wicked, to the one who takes a bribe. Then Jesus would tell you from Luke chapter 14. Remember the story of those men in Galilee whom Pontius Pilate mixed their blood with that of the offering, the sacrifice. And then those whom a tower fell upon. Jesus said, do you think those were more wicked than the rest of you in Jerusalem? He said, unless you all repent, you will equally perish like them. So this idea that because those people are sinners, they should suffer more than us who are not sinners. Before you know, you're in the realm of self-righteousness. No one is righteous, not even one. That's what the Bible says. Okay? So you cannot think that you're immune from any difficulty, any suffering in this world, just because. In fact, let me put it as it is. Because you're a follower of Christ, you have set yourself up as a target for suffering, whether physical or spiritual, psychological, emotional, because of the decisions you have to make as a Christian. You have to make decisions that are countercultural, and it will look suffering. Indeed, it will be difficult. But that is because of the decision to be a Christian. It is not because you're a Christian, therefore you'll be protected from those. No. It is because you're a Christian, therefore you've set yourself up for such difficulty. But yet, the New Testament writers constantly encourage us and say, count it joy. Count it joy. That's what James says. Rejoice when you're faced with suffering. And what does it say? It's like a crucible. Because God uses it, one, to refine our faith. But as he refines your faith, he positions you for others to see. And others are encouraged through. One day I believe that chances are me and Job will sit down and say, Naigwe guy, how did you pull through? Well, Paul says in Romans, I think it's 5, a good chunk of Romans 5, he talks about how do not lose hope, do not rejoice in suffering, because suffering produces endurance, endurance produces hope. Character produces hope, and hope does not disappoint. And hope does not disappoint. But man, the guy is suggesting that at its foundation is a journey. It is a journey. He's saying, while you face this suffering, there is something that is going to come out of it. It is part of the whole big thing called suffering. It can be for one reason or the other, but as a Christian, it can produce something wonderful. Okay? So, we cannot just say suffering well, because it's difficult to suffer well. But the attitude, which attitude can only be anchored in whom you look to. If it's money, when it's gone, you're in trouble. If it is people, when it's gone, you're in trouble. If it is God, he won't go. The psalmist says, even though I go through the valley of the shadow of death, what happens?
I fear no evil.
I fear no evil. Why? Because you're with me.
Rod and staff.
You're with me. Presence, you're with me. Your rod and staff, they comfort me. So that's what I would tell people out there, and because I've experienced it personally as well.
Okay. Then lastly, some famous preachers, again, have said suffering is not God's will for his children. We've spoken a bit about that. And we have the power to stop all suffering. What would you say to that, to those who are, to our viewers who are going through some difficult times, who have sought all these pastors to stop their suffering? You go, like the apostle you mentioned, suffering is not for you, cancer is not for you. We hear all these stories, and of course it's unfortunate, because you really do have some godly people who are going through some really difficult times. And hearing something like that, for many of them, it makes them doubt their faith, doubt the goodness of God, and so what would you say to those people, to encourage them, especially in light of those who are saying, suffering is not God's will for you? It makes them feel as though they are not God's children.
So that's a very rich, and I'm glad you called it a misconception. One, the idea that you have power to stop suffering is unbiblical. I would want to hear the verses of reference where in the Bible does someone get the impression that you as a human being, mortal as you are, that you have power to stop suffering. You don't. And even if you did, in view of the sovereign, omnipotent God that has power to do it but doesn't do it. So you, at one point, do you transcend God's wisdom and then stop? You understand? Because you would have to be God yourself in order to stop anything. Okay? But let's think about the fact that someone can even imagine that they can stop a situation or an experience of suffering. On whose behalf? Or it is not God's will for you to suffer. The question then would be, what in this situation is God's will? Because in praying for your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, sometimes there's going to be, God's will does not only manifest in quote unquote good things that happen to you. One of the common verses that we shall quote at people when they're going through difficulty is that Romans chapter 8 verse 28.
Yeah.
All things work together for the good.
Yeah.
All things work together for the good, but they don't have to be good. They may work together for the good, but they don't have to be good. So you don't have to use only good things to produce the good that God desires to produce. And because it is for the good, it is not for your good. Yes, it says for your good, but it is for His glory. It may turn out good for you, but it's for His glory. At the end of the day, have we seen God glorify Himself amidst suffering? Yes. What would it mean for you who has power, apparently, to stop that suffering? Do you know how much you'll be attempting to take away if God intends to glorify Himself? Okay? For example, breaking Joseph out of prison because you think it's unfair for him to be in prison. You have power to break him out, you break him out. It means he would not get the chance to interpret Pharaoh's dream. He would not get the freedom. He would not get the exposure to be second in command in Egypt. You understand? But because for you have power to denounce and cancel, and that's what people do. We reject, we cancel, we denounce. You may say all those things, but how much spiritual value do they actually have? But also, where in Scripture are they founded? So for me, my response to such people is that don't be fooled by unbiblical statements. They may sound good, but they're unbiblical. Go to the Bible, see the pages of the Bible. They're filled with agony, wrestling with personal pain and suffering. And that's the good thing about the Bible. The Bible doesn't say, no, you won't experience it. No, you will. But as long as it's within God's sovereignty, you can guarantee that it won't have their last say. That's why the cross is not the final word. The empty tomb speaks volumes. Do you understand? The cross is real suffering, innocent suffering. But the empty tomb speaks loudest. All right?
Yeah.
Yes, it speaks loudest.
Yeah. One of the things that is always amazes me about people who say this statement is they never apply them to the curses that are in Genesis 3. Women still have the labor pains and the 9 months, but no one ever tells them it's not God's will for you to do that because it's logically, because you can't get rid of that. Men are never told that, oh, now you'll work and enjoy the
fruits of your labor.
Yeah. But we always go for these other things and leave the normal daily things, which I guess people have gotten used to. But we don't want to refer to those suffering. We go for the other big things.
And you know, with pain, as humanity, pain is one of those gifts that God has given to us. I'm daring to say it. And I think because C.S. Lewis has said it, and I've seen it also in the Bible. You know, he says, in the book, The Problem of Pain, he talks about how pain, we can ignore pleasure, but we can't ignore pain because pain commands that we give it attention. You know, God speaks to us in our pleasure and whispers to us in our let me see if I've not mixed it up. But shouts to us in our pain, because pain is his megaphone to wake a deaf, to wake a deaf world, or a sleeping world, but more of a deaf world. And why is it so? Because we spend most of our time, for example, labor pains. Do you know today that women can go through labor, can give birth to a child without going through pain right there?
Because of the epidural.
Now, yes, but they don't realize Me who has 7 kids, I know very well what epidural means. You live with that pain for the rest of your life. Women that have taken epidurals to numb off the pain of childbirth, talk to them. They will tell you they have that, where they put that injection near the spine, that is a place that they have that pain for all their life.
Yeah, but the person will never look at it as...
But that's what I'm saying, that we pain, because we are trying our best to shield ourselves from pain, we don't realize how much more pain, like that one, the one that God pronounced, the pain of childbirth. Jesus tells you it is short-lived in comparison to what? To the joy of carrying a newborn.
Yeah.
Because after you've endured that pain, guess what? You're filled with joy of the child. But not that I'm encouraging us to endure that. I'm saying the truth is that those that avoid that pain and get shortcuts, ask them. Ask them if they're willing to say the truth. The truth is that they endure, they carry that pain for the rest of their lives. They keep telling you, my back. Because it is injected on the back. My back. The back. Why? That injection. And some take more than one. But where your goal is to avoid the other pain, you live with a different kind of pain. And that one is irreversible. You know?
Thank you very much, Raymond. It's been a wonderful to have you, and it's really been a very wonderful and an enriching discussion. We do hope to have you definitely again on the podcast to share with us on many other topics.
Sure.
And thank you all for joining us once again on Tabaza Podcast. Today we've been looking at suffering well. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Make sure you share with your friends, your family, your colleagues, your enemies, your frenemies, your BFFs, everyone, as in everyone. All of them. Yeah. We need to get the gospel message out.
Sure.
And once again, if you would like to support the ministry, Veracity Fount is a ministry that is set up to equip the church, to equip the saints, to equip. We do a lot of training of pastors. We do training in church history. We do so many things. We have a library, and we really do hope and encourage you all to support us in this ministry. So please feel free. The numbers are on the screen for the mobile money. Plus also you can directly wire whatever you can, any amount of money to the bank account that is listed below. So please do feel free to share with us. But most importantly, make sure you get this content out to others so that they may hear of this truth and be encouraged in their journey on faith, in suffering, and building up their faith. Once again, thank you very much, and God bless you.